I watched a horror movie by myself last week. Bad decision. There was this one scene. Nothing even happened yet. Just a hallway and a sound getting closer. And the hair on my arms stood straight up. Not a shiver. Not a flinch. My actual skin decided, on its own, without asking me, that this was the moment to do something about it. And here is the part that bothers me. What exactly was it trying to do? I was sitting on a couch. There was no wind, there was no danger. My arms just staged a tiny, pointless rebellion against a television. Ancient humans had this exact reaction. Except for them, it was not pointless. It was possibly one of the only things standing between them and becoming lunch, which makes MS wonder, if Goosebumps used to be a real, functioning survival tool, why does my body still bother running the program for a jump scare that isn't even trying that hard? Hi, I'm Marin Still, and today we are finding out why your skin still thinks you have fur. MS is not going to tell you Goosebumps are some leftover glitch we should be embarrassed about. MS is going to show you that this tiny, involuntary, slightly embarrassing skin reaction used to be a full body language system, doing two completely different jobs at once. And by the end of this, you will never side-eye a horror movie jump scare the same way again. Here is where it starts. Every single hair on your body sits inside a tiny follicle, and attached to that follicle is a microscopic muscle called the erector pili. When that little muscle contracts, it yanks the hair upright and puffs the skin around it into a small bump. That is the goosebump. It is not the hair doing anything clever on its own. It is a muscle, following instructions from your nervous system, doing exactly what it was built to do. The catch is, your body still runs this program even though the reason it exists mostly disappeared a very long time ago. Charles Darwin actually wrote about this back in 1872, in a book about how emotions physically show up in humans and animals. He noticed that people and animals raise their hair or fur in almost identical situations: fear, cold, extreme emotion, and he argued this was not a coincidence. It was a shared, ancient reflex, inherited from a version of us that was covered in a lot more hair than we are now. Stay with me. It gets weirder, because this reflex was doing two jobs at once, and they had almost nothing to do with each other. Job 1. Temperature. If you are covered in thick fur and you get cold, raising every hair on your body creates a thicker layer of trapped air right against your skin. Trapped air is an excellent insulator. Birds do this constantly, fluffing their feathers on a cold morning for the exact same reason: more trapped air, more warmth. For a furry ancestor standing in a cold wind, this was not decorative. It was a functioning internal jacket that turned on by itself. Job 2. Intimidation. And this one is the part that made MS actually laugh out loud when I first read about it. When a threatened animal is frightened or aggressive, the same reflex fires, but for a completely different reason. Raised fur makes an animal look physically bigger. A frightened cat arching its back with every hair standing on end is not just reacting, it is running an ancient bluff, trying to look large and dangerous enough that the actual fight never has to happen. Primatologists observing chimpanzees, including decades of field observations by Jane Goodall's research teams at Gombe, have documented this same hair-raising display during aggressive confrontations between chimps. Exactly the same muscle, exactly the same purpose. Puff up, look bigger, hope it works. Now picture your actual, factual, historical ancestor. Standing in front of something enormous, a cave bear maybe, something with claws considerably larger than a house cat's. Every hair on the back of their neck and arms stands straight up, an automatic reflex borrowed from thick ancestral fur that, by this point in human evolution, was already thinning out. And the intended effect, look bigger, look dangerous, is happening on a body that no longer has enough fur left to actually pull it off. The bear does not see a fearsome puffed-up rival. The bear sees a slightly damp, mostly hairless creature, having some kind of skin reaction. The system was still trying to run the old software. The hardware to make it actually work had already left the building. That gap, an instinct still firing long after the body that made it useful had changed, is not a small detail. It might be the most human thing about this entire reflex. Because here is what modern research adds to this. Neuroscientists studying something called frisson, that chill-up-the-spine feeling people get from music or an emotional scene in a film, have found that it activates the exact same physical pathway as this ancient fear and cold response. A study led by researcher Valerie Salimpour, examining the brain's reward system during intensely moving music, found that the same dopamine-driven emotional peak that gives people chills during a powerful song is tapping directly into this old system. Your body cannot always tell the difference between an actual physical threat and an overwhelming emotional moment. It just knows something big is happening, and it reaches for the only tool it has ever had for that: hair up, skin tight, brace for impact. So when you get goosebumps during a sad movie, or a song's key change, or someone telling a story that gives you chills, you are not malfunctioning. You are borrowing a survival reflex your ancestors needed for bears and cold nights, and repurposing it for beauty, grief, and a really good chorus. Here is the modern slap though, the part that connects back to my couch and my hallway jump scare. The reflex itself never got the memo that most of what scares modern humans is not, in fact, trying to eat us. My nervous system responded to a fictional hallway with the exact same urgency it would have used for an actual predator. Same muscle, same signal, wildly different stakes. And also, importantly, absolutely zero fur left to make the bluff even remotely convincing. Which means every time your arms prickle during a scary movie, you are watching a fully intact ancient survival system, still faithfully clocking in for work, even though the job it was hired for basically does not exist anymore. It is trying to make you look bigger and warmer using a body that gave up most of its fur tens of thousands of years ago. It is, in the kindest possible way, an animal instinct running on outdated instructions. So the next time you feel that prickle up your arms during a scary movie, remember what your ancestors were actually doing when this reflex first evolved. They were not being dramatic. They were trying to survive a cold night, or trying to look big enough that a bear decided the fight wasn't worth it. Somewhere along the way, we lost the fur that made the second half of that plan actually work, but the reflex stuck around anyway, quietly, faithfully, showing up centuries later for a horror movie that never even needed it. Hi, I'm Marin Still, and now you can never unknow this.